She's Brazil's most compelling defender of black feminism. Philosopher, writer, and professor Djamila Ribeiro has been instrumental in calling out structural racism and pushing for societal change, be it in publishing or in politics. Her latest book, Letters to My Grandmother, has just been published in French by Anna Koana, and Djamila joins us to discuss it in the studio. Welcome to the show, Djamila.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've been talking about your books and taking part in debates at the Étonnant Voyageur Festival in Saint-Malo here in France. It's a literary event about travel, broadening horizons. As a writer, you deal with race, class, gender. How has travel affected how you see those things?
Well, it was very important to me to be at Saint-Malo for the first time and had the opportunity to exchange knowledge with writers from other places. But as a Brazilian woman, I think it's important to bring our perspectives on that, because usually people, they have ideas about Brazil only based on stereotypes. Of course, our culture is amazing, but I think it's important to bring this kind of literature and perspectives on Brazil. And traveling around, for me, it's a great experience to see that. Of course, in Brazil, it's a completely different context, but how can we find some bridges and some similarities when we are in our countries like France, for example?
And bring complexity, like you say, to those
Yes.
stereotypes. Now, your latest book, Letters to My Grandmother, feels very personal. It's also very direct. It's Djamila speaking to Antonia, woman to woman, as adults, even though she sadly died before you reached adulthood. What was the most important thing you wanted to say to your grandmother through this book?
For me, it was important to honor my ancestrality through women, because usually we do not make visible the work of women who are caring, women that are at house taking care of us. Because in Brazil, as I am a public writer, people say, oh, Djamila, she is what she is because her father encouraged her to study and to do courses. But what about my mom? What about my grandmother who washed my clothes, who was there cooking for us? So for me, it was important to honor the work of these women, and also to bring that this is a discussion about feminism as well. This is a discussion about invisibility. This is a discussion about love, forgiveness, and to understand the difference between generations, because usually we blame our mothers from everything, or our grandmothers, and how it's important as a woman for me to understand their contexts and to finish this cycle of blaming, this cycle of hate that sometimes we can have with women in our family. So for me, it was to process all these things, but also to honor these women, especially Black women in Brazil, that usually are not seen as the way they should.
It's a very affectionate, loving tribute, in fact. And one of your previous publications, very famous in Brazil, it's translated as Where We Stand in English. It expands this notion of lugar de fala, or the speaking place, which is a really important concept when it comes to discussing societal realities for different people. The author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is a great admirer of this text. She wrote the foreword for the English version. Can you explain what this speaking place is?
Speaking place is not about what we say. It's about the place we speak from. I think it's important to acknowledge that as Black people, we do not have the same access and the same opportunities than white people, for example, because we come from a place marked by profound inequalities. So I think it's important to understand that everybody has a speaking place, because it's about social locus, but how it's important to bring all these voices that come from these places. Because as I am a Black woman in Brazil, I'm part of a group that historically haven't had the same opportunities, as well as our books, our intellectual productions were not present in academia or in the editorial market as it should be. So speaking place is also a way to say you have to confront this position of a unique voice and to bring different perspectives that come from different speaking places. The speaking place from women, from indigenous people, from Black people, and how it's important to value all this plurality instead of value a universal voice, but a universal voice that's based on a specific speaking place of the European white man.
And this concept of speaking place has come up against criticism from those who say that it encourages identity politics, it puts people into groups or communities, and it goes against universality, which is a very important notion here in France,
Yes.
especially. How do you respond to those remarks?
I say that capitalism, racism, and sexism divided the society, created this kind of places. So it's important to recognize all these places and to recognize that if you come from a specific place, it means that you have less opportunity and that your voice will not be heard. So it's a fact. So it's not about think people as abstract things. It's about to acknowledge that there are inequalities in our country and there are people that historically haven't had the right to a voice. So it's important to listen to this voice and to bring in all this voice. We are not dividing the society. The society is already divided. We are just highlighting the division in order to transcend the division that was already imposed on us.
Now, as part of your activism, one area where you've already effected very tangible change was the publishing sector in Brazil, launching the Plural Feminism's imprint to support Black women authors, start to redress this balance in the world of literature. You quote a very shocking statistic that between 1965 and 2014, 70% of books published in Brazil were written by men, 90% of whom were white men, in a country where more than half of the population self-identify as Black. You've done a lot of outreach projects for literature to change that. In your experience, what works? What's the solution?
This is a discussion about speaking place, these datas, for example. So this means that this voice that was imposed as universal continue to domain all the system and accusing us to be focused on identity, forgetting that masculinity and whiteness are also identities. So that's why I decided to publish Black People in Brazil, to bring these voices from these speaking places in order to make the market more diverse and to understand that if Black people are writing books, white women, indigenous women, and these books are not present, it means that we have a problem. We have a system that continue to deny our access to this kind of places. So I decided to do that to show our diversity and to have an editorial market that's really representative of the Brazilian society. Because if only men are published, it means that the editorial market is not representative of the Brazilian society because the Brazilian society is already diverse. And it was a huge success. I became a bestseller in Brazil and I published a lot of other authors who became bestseller. And it's important to show to people, if you only read people that comes from your speaking place, you are learning the history in an incomplete way. You are just seeing for one perspective. And how rich it is when you read people who comes from different perspectives. I know who I am because I read authors from Africa, Latin America, from Europe, white, Black, indigenous, and how it's rich to improve our understanding of the world.
I wanted to ask about some of the people who influenced you. As you've named Black feminists like Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, Lelia Gonzalez, and I think reading the work of Toni Morrison was a real turning point for you. What was it about her books that made you see the world differently?
I was 19 years old when I read The Bluest Eye, and for me it was a completely changing my life because I could see myself as a writer. And I could see myself in that story that she was telling. A story about a Black young girl that was, that wanted to be white because she was experiencing too much hate. So I could relate with that story and also to see that woman, amazing, Toni Morrison, writing that book and to see, wow, I can be a writer too. This woman, she is the only Black woman in history who won the Nobel Prize until today. And her work is so important because she showed to us that it was possible.
Yeah, she was inspiring, a pioneer. Well, here in France, it's the year of Brazil, a cultural season, a moment of celebration where a huge range of events have been showcasing the wealth of artistic talent from your country. The Grand Palais in Paris is showing the paintings of contemporary artists Antonio Obá, Agrade Camus, and the sculptural creations of Sonia Gomez are at the outpost of the Louvre in Lens. It's also been a chance to strengthen diplomatic ties. President Lula was in Paris last week to meet with Emmanuel Macron, who gave him a very warm welcome and said that Brazil is back. Djamila, do you agree? Is Brazil back? Where's its place on the global stage?
Oh, Brazil is back because you know that in the past years in Brazil, we were under a very tragic administration. So it is good to see that Brazil now is being respected again the way we should. And about San Malo, for example, there were a lot of Brazilian writers there and Black Brazilians, indigenous Brazilian. And I think that Brazil is back since we show the Brazilian people diverse as the way the Brazilian people is. I think it's important to say that we are back, but we want to be back with all this diversity, with all this perspective, with all these colors and genders, because this is Brazil.
A more authentic portrait of a complex society.
Exactly.
Djamila, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
A reminder that Jamila's book, Letters to My Grandmother, is available in French translation, as well as the other titles we mentioned. We'll leave you with a closer look at the France-Brazil cultural season taking place in both countries this year. Here in Paris, the Fluctuar boat has invited 5 Brazilian women artists to show their work on the banks of the Seine. Creativity that embraces murals, sculpture and textiles. It's all deeply rooted in the environments they were made in. The show's called Amazon 2. We'll leave you with a preview. Otherwise, do check in with us here next time on Arts 24. We're on social media too.